Noting it's 4 minutes past 9, and it appears that we have enough to begin. Anthony, I'll turn it over to you to have a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Racines? Commissioner Pope?
Here.
Commissioner Naves?
Here.
Commissioner Reville?
Here.
Commissioner Wallace?
We have a...
We'll excuse Commissioner Wallace.
Right, we'll excuse Commissioner Wallace.
And then Commissioner Meyer.
Excuse Commissioner Meyer.
Mr. Chairman, you do have a quorum.
Commissioner Meyer is approaching as we speak, so we will correct the record. We have a quorum. We can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I will quickly check in with our IT operative here that we are live and out of the practice room. We are recording. The transcription is running and closed captions as well. And it looks like everyone we need in speaker mode is in speaker mode. Excellent. Thank you. So to quickly read through my announcements and disclaimer, agendas and sign-in sheets are in the back of the room. If you are here, please fill those out. We appreciate it. And of course, key decisions pertaining to the Wyoming Stable Token Initiative will be made by the commissioners of the Stable Token Commission or the state legislature in public meetings such as this. At this time, no blockchain has been selected for deployment of Wyoming stable tokens, and no Wyoming stable tokens have been issued. Further, the only commissioners are those appointed by statute, the governor, or a majority vote of the commission. Information outside of those public meetings should only be considered factual and legitimate if it is distributed through our official channels. At this time, these are limited to our website at stabletoken.wyo.gov, the Wyoming legislature website at wyoleg.gov, and our social media channels with the @WyoStable username on Twitter, YouTube, GitHub, and Warpcast. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I typically take us through the agenda, and I'm happy to do so if we're ready for that.
Please do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So today we'll do a quick resource update, have some exciting announcements there. We'll go through meeting minutes from the last couple of discussions we have, because we haven't cleared those in a while. I want to get the stockpiles done before the end of the year. We'll go through our monthly budget review for the month ending November 30th. We'll do a brief industry update. Commissioner Naves, at that point, I will turn it over to you for a discussion around the FinCEN Advisory Group. We will discuss rulemaking. I know we've gone back and forth this a few times, but we are ready to hit the launch button on a few things we'll cover off. And then we will spend the bulk of today's discussion talking about procurement. We'll go through the results of our request for qualifications that ended last Thursday afternoon. We will go through RFPs that have been drafted and the status thereof. And then we will wind down and cover off the calendar for next year in February, go through public comment, and then I'm glad to give everyone a little bit of a break for the holidays, I think.
Very good.
If there are no questions, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a couple of quick introductions.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have a team. We have a team of 5 now. I'm very excited to welcome Joseph Saldana as our Chief Financial Officer and Keith Lawhorn as our Chief Information Security Officer. Joe has over 25 years of experience in the financial sector, including tenure at Deutsche Bank and Lehman Brothers. He was responsible for a cash management business with over $140 million in annual revenues, $50 billion in assets, and over 40 different investment products. And because this is a digital assets program, Joe has also built his own oracles for digital asset pricing. And Keith joins us as well as our CISO. Keith has over 25 years of experience across law enforcement, cybersecurity, and digital asset industries. He has supported federal law enforcement, including FinCEN, Border Patrol, and Homeland Security, in the prevention of illicit financial activity, and has received multiple patents pertaining to cryptocurrency hardware devices. So I'm very happy to have the full team assembled. I will quickly give everyone a thank you, a personal thank you for jumping into the deep end with both legs immediately after coming on board. And I look forward to working with everybody as we bring this program forward.
Welcome. Mr. Saldana, I see you're on. Is there anything you'd like to say?
I just want to say that I'm very happy to be here. I'm very excited about the opportunity and all the benefits that it'll bring to the citizens of Wyoming.
Wonderful. Are there any questions? Hearing none. Mr. Lawhorn, thanks for joining. Anything you'd like to say?
Thank you.
Or are you
It's
frozen?
it's an honor to be here, and very impressed with the team.
Excellent, thank you. Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we will segue right into our meeting minutes for the last couple of discussions we've had. First one on your docket is going to be STC-019. That was our October monthly meeting. During that discussion, I think that was Deborah's first meeting, because we do have Deborah on fairly recently as well as our Chief Risk and Compliance Officer. We talked through the cadence of meetings for 2025. We worked through a couple of ways, and Commissioner Meyer had discussed a few ways where the state could support the stable token through various programs that are already in place. And then we had a number of updates from our subcommittees, the work which has since manifested in our blockchain selection exercise, our RFQs and RFPs. And that was pretty much that. So if there's any questions on the discussion from October, happy to clear those, but that is the meeting minutes from October 24th.
If there are no questions, I'd entertain or corrections. I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. Is there support for the audit?
Second.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Pope. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those minutes pass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to the meeting minutes from our special meeting on November 15th. This one will be fairly truncated. This was a 30-minute discussion that was dedicated to presenting the working group's findings from the blockchain selection exercise. So we walked through the criteria that were created by the working group, as well as the results that they derived. The commission then unanimously voted to accept and approve those criteria and the ultimate decision of the working group as our 9 candidate blockchains. There's 5 layer 1s therein, being Solana, Avalanche, Sui, Ethereum, and I'm missing one, and Stellar. And then several layer 2 blockchains, including Polygon, Optimism, Base, and Arbitrum. And that was the material of that conversation. So if there's any questions, happy to entertain them.
Questions, corrections?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just wondering how, maybe this isn't the right time. If it isn't, we'll pass till a proper time. So just wondering how you're getting along with updating the rules to include a rolling basis of consideration for new blockchains.
Through the chair,
That's coming up.
Commissioner Meyer, that is absolutely coming up in our rulemaking, and I think
Great,
we'll
great.
get right to it.
Perfect.
Okay, if there are no further corrections or comments, I'd entertain a motion. It's been moved by the treasurer. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by the auditor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 That motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to our last set of meeting minutes here. This was from our monthly meeting dated November 21st. So hopping into some of the discussion from last month, the first thing we covered off on was a few updates to the blockchain selection memo. Again, if you recall, we did accelerate the blockchain selection conversation a week ahead of time to make sure that we had an ability to get our data, our findings, our criteria into the public forum. And then we had heard back from a few different organizations, foundations, companies that build on top of these blockchains with some data that some of it we took and we updated our findings, or at least the source of our data. Some of them we felt that we were closer to the pin the first time around. There were no material changes to the candidate blockchains nor the scoring. After that, we had talked about the update to our procurement rules that would allow rolling qualifications, and that'll manifest in our upcoming update. We went through the request for qualifications memo, request for qualifications packet, and then the commission reviewed and approved all of the different RFQs we put forth. There were functionally 8 forms, one being a vendor registration form, and then 7 RFQs based on features and functions that will support the development, deployment, and ongoing management of a Wyoming stable token. So that is where we spent most of our time last month. And again, I am happy to discuss or answer any questions that the group may have on the substance of last month's conversation.
Questions, comments? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Been moved, seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to our next item here. This is our monthly budget summary for the month ending November 30th. So as you can see, the main driver is and will continue to be salaries for the team. Beyond that, there is slightly more expense around IT hardware. I mean, that we've provisioned now fully functioning laptops and mobile devices to the team. So everyone's got theirs at this point. So again, that's a blip that showed up in November that will not be recurring. We will have a recurring slight increase in, of course, the subscription-based softwares as a result, but that is less material. There was some travel from I think we actually got it captured in the month of October for Deborah's visit to Wyoming. But beyond that, that is the bulk of this. One thing I will quickly say is because we do have several new members of the team rolling on and have been doing so, there will be some weird variances in this for the next, I would say, perhaps 2 months. For example, if you look at October, there is a big spike there for salaries because if someone joins in late September, that gets captured in October. So these will take, I think, a little bit of time to settle out, and benefits will follow the same trajectory. But I would say, hopefully by our February numbers, we are rebaselined, and I've discussed this with our representatives in A&I already, so they're well aware of the need to straighten some of that out and then perhaps start allocating money more formally out of the 900 series into where we expect it to be on a recurring basis in the future. Any questions?
Questions? Questions? Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to quickly give a brief industry update, the stable token market cap is now over $200 billion. That's a first time we've crossed that threshold. And again, there's more and more noise about this industry every day, most of it positive, which is great. Coinbase put out a 2025 market outlook report that, again, continues to press that stable coins are likely the killer app for the digital asset and cryptocurrency market. Stablecoin transaction volumes exceeded $27 trillion this year, and that is expected to continue to rise.
How much float was that? That was 27 trillion, but how much was in play all the time?
If we're talking through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, if you're talking about the market cap of stable coins that are kind of in flux, we've grown over the course of this year from about 100 billion to 200 billion. And those volumes as a percentage of the stable tokens in circulation has maintained pretty significant, even when we've had some drops in the greater kind of crypto ecosystem. The volume of stable coin transactions are typically the driver. I mean, they're over 50% or roughly 50% of the of all volume across all chains at this point.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my, I guess, head around how much is actually deposited out there that's taking in revenue off of the treasury bonds or whatever the collateral is, and what that size of the pot is. Yeah.
Well, one thing through the chair that I quickly mentioned, Commissioner Meyer, is depends on when you look at the chart, but if you look at fiat-backed stablecoins in aggregate, they are functionally if you were to pit them up against foreign holders of U.S. debt, stablecoins are a top 20 holder at this point, sometimes 14, 16, 18, but it's in the mix.
Okay. Thank you.
In terms of some other news around incumbents, Binance and Circle have formed a strategic partnership to promote USDC globally, which is a bit of a challenge to Tether's dominance in the space. At the same time, we are seeing some activity dying down in Europe as the markets and crypto asset regulation comes into full force. And there are stablecoins that may not be as compliant with that framework as they need to be, so they're being delisted and perhaps they'll get relisted later. But I will say, to me, that seems like an opportunity. I know that Deborah has been doing tremendous work and around our reserves management rule set. Deborah, I think, and I don't mean to steal any thunder here, but I think Deborah's looked at, 16 or 17 different frameworks, both domestically and internationally, things that are proposed, things that are promulgated, to understand how reserves management works for stablecoins all around the world, so we can create something that considers all of that. Obviously, we need to maximize what is best for the state of Wyoming and for our program here, but can acknowledge what is happening abroad and perhaps get a Wyoming stable token through a couple of pinholes as we roll this thing out, and perhaps get a broader view here than we perhaps expected from the get-go. And through the chair, if I would say, if Deborah's got a hand up, I can't see it, but.
Yes, I'm here.
Anything you want to add to?
I thank you for the request. Anthony is correct. I did spend a considerable time looking at about 15 or 16 different frameworks, not just the foreign framework, but also the ones in the US, and particularly bills that are currently in place up through our federal partners and our legislatures vis-a-vis putting together and fomenting a comprehensive digital asset regime along with a stable coin protocols. So that is something that I am actively monitoring, ensuring that we are compliant regardless of regardless of movements, and particularly if there's any pivot points, we can shift with the goal of accommodating particularly any federal requirements that are handed down in 2025.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer.
Did you do an analysis of those 15 different circumstances as to if any of them cannot essentially freeze and seize upon a order of a competent court of jurisdiction?
Through the chair, my recollection is, and I have not looked at the database I created in some time, I don't have a independent recollection of freeze and seize capabilities as required in the frameworks. However, in reviewing other stablecoin issuers, they generally do, not all, but some do have freeze and seize protocols in place. And I reviewed those protocols to assess how they're managed depending on the particular stablecoin issuer.
Okay, it might be, at some point in time, actually have, I guess, some statistics that are, verifiable as far as that particular process or ability. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
Paul.
As a quick response to that, again, I want to be specific. Deborah has been focused on the reserves management piece behind the tokens. What is next on her docket after we get through the rulemaking process for the reserves, which landed in my inbox, I think, a couple days ago, will be the token treatment, where that will indeed be a focus. So in the background to the reserves piece, we have had a working group in place called Token Design, part of our technology subcommittee, that has been focused on that particular nuance there. Who's doing freeze and seize, who is not. We're pulling in open source code bases. So you likely have access to that. I'm happy to share that directly with you because it's on Notion with the rest of our content. We do need to make sure we are aware of the quorum rules there. If I can't grab it there or get you in there, I could just send you a copy of it.
I guess what I'm kind of making sure that we have a firewall between our reserves. If somebody wants to freeze and seize, they can seize the token, but they can't get in and freeze our reserves. That's where I'm kind of looking at that aspect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Excellent. And then just through the chair, last piece of news was that Ripple, which is a token called XRP, they, as of earlier this week, gained regulatory approval from the New York Department of Financial Services to launch its stablecoin called RLUSD, backed by US dollar deposits and government bonds, which launched earlier this week, I think Tuesday. Happy to answer any questions on the news, but beyond that, I would be turning over the reins to Commissioner Naves.
Questions? Treasurer.
Yeah, I guess quickly, when these new tokens come online, what's their, I guess, their, I'm trying to look for the right word, I guess, asset value or reserves on the first day, or I'm just trying to figure out what we need to kind of base a successful launch on as far as how much money we can put in the first day, so we look like we're a real player and just not a paper tiger, so to speak.
Through the chair, excellent question, Commissioner. So looking at RLUSD now, this launched, it looks like, with a market cap of about $50 million over the last few days. So trying to publish the volume here. It looks, well, that's from 1 day, so that's not going to help. But looks like a pretty much a straight line. So one early investment, and that's going to probably sit there for a while. You know, this is fairly standard. You'd see if I was to pull up, let's say the PayPal stablecoin PYUSD, you'd see its rise in kind of a step function. So you get your initial value in, then you get onboard into a payment provider, which helps you with your circulation, then more market makers get interested, and hopefully it would become a virtuous cycle over time. But that to me seems like the appropriate kind of starting point for one of these things.
Thank you. Commissioner Naves.
Thank you, Governor. So I wanted to bring to the attention of my fellow commissioners a publication that was made by FinCEN. FinCEN is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which is a bureau within the U.S. Department of Treasury. FinCEN is the bureau responsible for combating money laundering and terrorist financing in the United States and provide financial intelligence to the U.S. government. So 2 weeks ago, they put out an announcement seeking applications to an advisory board that by law they are required to put together. So it's called the Bank Secrecy Act Advisory Group. And that group is comprised of financial institutions, which are the bulk of the folks that work directly with FinCEN in reporting, as well as trade groups and non-federal regulators or law enforcement agencies. The goal is to strengthen the scope of applicability of the Bank Secrecy Act and ensuring that it is actually being applied and enforced the correct way to ensure the financial intelligence is being utilized to combat money laundering and terrorist financing. Now, when you talk about BSA applicability, you think about financial institutions. So you talk about banks, money transmitters, trust companies, anyone that has a charter with the Department of Banking, Division of Financial Institutions, or any other related state level regulator, as well as the OCC and at the federal level. So these institutions must comply by law with the Bank Secrecy Act, and they have several reporting requirements under the Bank Secrecy Act. For our token, we have been looking at the Bank Secrecy Act for best practices in putting our risk and compliance program together. By law, the Commission is not required to comply with this statute. However, with the goal of not enabling money laundering or terrorist financing through our rails, we'll be looking to best practices for the Bank Secrecy Act to ensure that deployment of our token is done the right way. If you look at the industry, obviously, you have some of the issuers, such as Paxos and Circle, that must comply with the BSA based on their licensing regimes. And then you have some issuers that are offshore that may choose to comply with the Bank Secrecy Act or not. right? That is their choice since they're not under US regulation. Why do I believe that it will be relevant for our commission to be part of this? We are the first ones that are putting together a token as a public agency. There's no one else. We are pretty much setting the standard for what this is going to look like, not only at the state level, but potentially at the federal level. Anthony, Deborah, Devin, and I, the Attorney General's office, have been in communications with different federal law enforcement agencies such as the FBI, the DOJ. We spoke with FinCEN. We have spoken with the OCC. We have spoken with CFTC and others. And a question that we get over and over again is, what is your commitment to combating money laundering and terrorist finance, which for us is unequivocal that it will happen. So what I believe is that we have an opportunity to also guide applicability of the BSA's best practices to other states or even perhaps the federal government as they launch a similar token. I think we can provide a lot of insights that will be helpful for the federal government to learn. When Anthony and I speak with these agencies, it's interesting because the questions that they ask from us are somewhat similar to what they ask from private industry because that's the only frame of reference that they have. And when we remind them that we're not private industry, that this is the government of the state of Wyoming, and that we're looking to implement these practices, they are very, very, happy to hear and want to work with us in ensuring that we are doing this with the best interest of the citizens of Wyoming forefront. So I believe that this will be a good opportunity for the state of Wyoming to drive this kind of approach to combating money laundering and terrorist financing at the state level for issuance of digital assets. And it's a good opportunity for us to have our voices heard as well. So I wanted to bring to my fellow commissioners a consideration about putting a nomination for joining this advisory group. The deadline is January 6th. It just asks 4 bullet points, your name of the organization, point of contact, description of the financial institution, trade group, regulator, or law enforcement agency, which will be the Wyoming Stable Token Commission, reasons why we believe that participation will bring value to the group, which are the reasons which I just highlighted to my fellow commissioners, reasons why the organization, trade groups must submit a full list of their members, which is not applicable to us. So we just list the commission and the members in the commission. This is due on January 6th, and I would be working, if the commission approves this request, with Anthony and Deborah and the Attorney General's office to put these answers together and submit it within the deadline, shortly after the holidays. So I wanted to advance this for conversation with the commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Naves. Discussion? Please, Director, any thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner Naves. I just want to kind of double down on something that was perhaps implicit and just to make it explicit. As Commissioner Naves noted, the BSA is not applicable to us. We are not a bank. And yes, we do want to leverage best practices from existing frameworks to make sure that Wyoming stable tokens are not used in illicit financing. But that being said, there is also a lot of noise in this particular industry about the application of these regulations that are for financial models which are not necessarily one-to-one with the trajectory of financial transactions. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to kind of not only to get our names out there and have a voice at the table, but to bring a unique perspective where we can be very candid about how perhaps some of these new regulations should be drafted or brought forth for digital asset forward organizations, recognizing that we can be candid because, again, we are kind of outside the box a little bit on this. And I think that is a very interesting place to be. I think it's, we've certainly been putting the work in across a lot of these dimensions. And I think it would be great for us to get a more formal role in not only, an organization like this, or an advocacy group like this, but really any kind of, federal apparatus that's looking to actually learn from those who are doing, I think we have opportunity to steer the ship a little bit here, maybe punch outside our weight class.
Thank you, Director. Any further?
I guess, have you identified anything that's going to be different from a stable token implementation compared to a financial institution? Are there anything that kind of pop out that say, well, yeah, we need to go down this road, or this needs to be moved one way or the other? Or are those kind of still in development?
So an example, Kurt, financial institutions are required to file something that is called a suspicious activity report, or commonly called SAR, a SAR. That is when you identify an activity that serves no purpose or by statute has other types of, elements that you must report that to law enforcement so that they can investigate and determine if there is actually a crime being perpetrated. Now, that usually follows through a bank, and the bank would then submit this to FinCEN, and FinCEN will select for investigation. As you can anticipate, multiple SARs are filed on a daily basis by different financial institutions as they flag potential illicit activity. For us, a conversation with FinCEN, with Anthony, Deborah, Devin, and I had is, how would we file a SAR? Would we file a SAR? What does that look like for us? So to Anthony's point, because this is not applicable directly to a state, because the state will have its own financial intelligence unit, the work is, how do we partner with these law enforcement agencies to ensure that information is being relied with the speed that is needed, with the blockchain speed that is needed, right? Because if you think about private chain transactions and the speed that they take when you put transactions in a public blockchain, the speed and the ability for these funds to be dispersed is much faster. Now, the good element of blockchains, which is different than traditional financial services, is everything is recorded on blockchains. So you just need to crawl the chains and find them and freeze the wallet to be able for investigations to take place and determinations to be made. So we believe that these types of insights and these conversations are the ones that are going to be extremely helpful to the development of the SA for similar organizations and, as they proceed. From my experience working in a financial institution that was regulated at the state level and that had to comply with the BSA by being a private entity, issuance of stable tokens is not viewed any differently than issuance of store value under money transmission laws. So compliance is done in the same capacity. But what I think is imperative to us here is really just drive that conversation. As Anthony said, we have an opportunity to do something that hasn't been done before and to provide insights, which actually highlighted a very good point. Since we're not required to comply with this is something that we're doing because we believe it's best practices. We can really add to this conversation as an impartial, participant, as someone that really doesn't have a stake in the game, because we want to make this a better system, not necessarily because we must comply with it.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thanks. So what's the pleasure of the commission?
So if I may, Governor, I would like to make a motion for submission of our nomination of the Wyoming Stable Token Commission to be a member of the Bank Secrecy Act Advisory Group with FinCEN.
Is there support? It's been seconded by the treasurer. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. And Commissioner Naves, thank you for bringing that to our attention. I agree with you. I think it's very important that we are engaged in that.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Anthony.
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Naves. Next up on the docket is rulemaking. So Commissioner Meyer, will come back around to your point here. First thing, just to kind of set the stage, we have the regular rulemaking memo. Just to kind of, again, organize our thoughts here. So what I have in front of you today is two sets of regular rules. One is for procurement, which is kind of an extension of what we've been doing. One is surrounding the Public Records Act in the state. So to recap where we are on procurement, we've passed two sets of emergency rules. So we are, you only get two bites of the apple on that one. And our procurement process is covered through March 20th of 2025. And it should be behind the FinCEN one if people are looking for it. So obviously we want to pass regular rules and get those or promulgate our regular rules around procurement. We want to get that moving. But even as we wanted to do so, we were looking at that submission period simultaneously as we were looking to get our blockchain selection activity complete as well. And we did have some feedback from that exercise where people wanted to see, even if we didn't make the cut today for X, Y, and Z reason, how can we get involved down the road when this process is, robust? There's Wyoming stable tokens that, we want to be a multi-chain program, but we've only launched on one network so far. So what I've done is work with the Attorney General's office to review the State Construction Department rules on rulemaking, which also include a rolling qualification. And I have created a new chapter in our procurement rules, which is Chapter 6, the ongoing submission of statements of qualification. And we'll go through that momentarily to accomplish that. And it's all of a page and change. And if the commission is comfortable with that, we will move forward and file those regular rules immediately because, again, there is kind of a shot clock on this. I just want to pause real quick. It looks like people are, I want to make sure everyone has the right paperwork in front of them. I'm not sure if.
This is the regular rulemaking memo.
Correct.
I do have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Please, Mr.
Yeah,
Treasurer.
in subsection B, allow selection proposals that provide the greatest long-term benefit to the state. That doesn't say anything about risk, I guess, is one thing. The other thing is a long-term benefit that it's a little bit subjective because we don't know whether it's for 5 years or 50 years. It's, and I guess I'm coming from an investment side, and what we always say is the highest return on a risk-adjusted basis, or the highest benefit on a risk-adjusted basis. But I don't have any, I guess, dog in this hunt, if nobody else does. But I'm just wondering, can we define what a long-term benefit is? I don't know if there's anything that's usual or customary when people use the term long-term. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, I've got good news and bad news for you. Which is that's not our wording. That's from the legislature. What you're referring to on page 1 of the regular rulemaking memo is the statute that LSO put forth at the beginning of this year around our ability to run procurement through the agency.
Enough said.
You can't lobby, so stuck there until further notice, I think. Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, just quickly move through the rest of the memo in general, then we can get into the meat on the bones here. The second piece here is the Public Records Act. So the Wyoming Public Records Act is at statute 16-4-201 through 205. This is functionally the statute that says we are a public entity at the behest of the public. We need to make our information available as, as appropriate requests come in, and there's a lot more nuance behind that. But to be specific, there is a mechanism by which people can use this in a perhaps difficult way if they wanted to make things tough and just request information ad infinitum. They'd be able to do so because there's nothing really to stop them from doing so. So there are several agencies, predominantly the Department of Administration and Information, A&I, that created and promulgated the Uniform Procedures, Fees, Costs, and Charges for Inspection, Copying, and Producing Public Records. And that is a set of rules that essentially, and you have it in your packets, It is a set of rules that assesses not large, but some amount of costs for records that need to be provided and the time spent away from work and your day-to-day job doing that collection and collation. I spoke to the AG about this. The AG themselves has taken this rule onto their own agency, but simply just essentially copying it by reference, and recommended that we do the same. So this is not something that we would pursue emergency rulemaking for. We wouldn't have the justification to do it. But it is something that it's, I think, fairly lightweight. And it's something that's in your packet as well. We can go through that. But I wanted to quickly cue that up, and then happy to get into the substance of both of these. But I'll pause for any questions out the gate.
And Mr. Treasurer.
Just looking at this, we've been run across this, and it's an old rule, and copying is the problems because people just say, well, you don't have to copy it and charge me 10 cents a page. Just hit a button and send it to us electronically. So the problem that you have in there, if you're gonna get a software program that's gonna help you with these things and a computer that's gonna run it and the training that's gonna do it, those all have costs, but none of them are really, I guess, promulgated within this rule. So I think it probably needs an update, and that's something that we're going to try to attempt to do, I think, to basically say that, or the equivalent cost for an electronic transmission or something to get back, the costs and expenses for the system, for the hardware, and for the training. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Yeah, Director, I was going to say the idea here is not necessarily to dissuade people. We are a transparent organization, but to understand that there are staffing and other issues that can be pretty substantial. So. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to quickly turn a few pages in your packet, the document I'd like to share now has Chapter 6, Ongoing Submission of Statements of Qualification at the top. Just to take one step back and be extremely explicit here, the Commission has already approved the regular rules and also has authorized me to go ahead and file those. This was essentially just the limiting reagent that we wanted to make sure we crossed off the list before we did that. So the rest of the chapters are not here. Didn't feel the need to kill a couple more trees because we're not really touching those. What we have here with ongoing submission of statements of qualification, of course, we have our authority to do our own promulgation of rules as an agency. In terms of the applicability, this would apply for both Chapter 2 of our rules, which is for requests for proposal, as well as Chapter 3, which is for competitive bidding. And then when we get into the ongoing submission of statements of qualifications, we say that the Commission shall first develop, adopt, and maintain an approved list of candidate blockchains that a Wyoming stable token may launch on based on criteria adopted by the Commission. So essentially, that would be an extension of the exercise we've already done. There are several chains, including Ripple that I mentioned earlier, that may not have made it through one gate last time around, and here we are barely 2 months later, and they'd coast by with where we are now. Maybe not scoring-wise, but at least from some of the binary gates we had previously. The next one is to develop and administer a review portal on the agency website that publicizes the assessment of these blockchains, which again, we've already done and been very transparent and public about our decision-making. The Commission would develop, adopt, and maintain an approved list to qualified firms and bidders. Again, firms are the RFP side of the house, bidders are the competitive bid side of the house, regardless of the availability of a specific RFP or bid, for functions that may facilitate the development, deployment, and management of a Wyoming stable token, again, based on criteria adopted by the Commission. And then finally, develop and administer a submission portal on the agency website to collect information from firms and bidders and publicize firms and bidders that are deemed to be qualified. If we look at Section 3, subsection B, this is where we talk about once a vendor, for lack of a better term, just to be more succinct here, passes those gates, they will be considered qualified for at least 2 years. Of course, if the commission wanted to put the specifics into place and say if there's any kind of, black swan event and someone had to come off that list, of course, I would expect to see that when we get into the meat and bones there. But for now, it would be a 2-year period where you'd be qualified. And again, that's similar to the way the state construction department does it. And then we put a couple of time gates on both the agency resources and the commission to do the approvals. So for the agency, we would have 60 business days after receipt of a submission to make an assessment. And then we would, on a quarterly basis, so every 90 business days functionally, at a minimum, the agency team would present those findings to the commission to opine and approve or disapprove of the qualification. So I'll pause there for any comments, but I think this is a good follow-up to some of the discussions we've had in the previous weeks to make sure that people understand that this is a long-tailed exercise, and we do have a remit from the state legislature to be multi-chain, and we are certainly pursuing that.
Yeah, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you, Mr. Treasurer.
I'm just wondering on subsection B there, after a former bidder that we might consider seeks to provide or provide services. And that allows, people that want to provide, and it's clear that somebody that isn't qualified can seek to provide, but they're still subject to these circumstances here that because circumstances change and you want to qualify people, if something changes, then this gives you a door to walk through and say, okay, you guys were on the approved list, but circumstances change, so we want you to, go ahead and requalify, so to speak. But I don't know if that makes it clearer or muddies it up, so I guess I'd leave it in your court.
Mr. Treasurer, it would appear to me that seeks to provide would almost include anybody in the universe. Is that your?
Well, I think it's the universe of where we were at before we qualified it down to 9. If somebody comes in and they want to get put on the list as somebody that's qualified, then I don't know whether it's clear whether we have that functionality in the language that's there. And if it's someplace else, so people can, raise their hand and say, if we can be of any service, these are our qualifications, but I don't know if that's in the rest of the language.
Director, do you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can do. I think you're both right. We do say in this initial wording here, a firm or bidder that provides services related to the deployment of a Wyoming stable token. That would, to Commissioner Meyer's point, indicate that this is already an existing relationship simply up for renewal. But Mr. Chairman, to your point, if we say seeks to provide, it is a larger audience. We could be more specific about the services themselves. Instead of services related to the development, deployment, or management of a Wyoming stable token, perhaps we want to rein that in. That's a potentiality there, and say it's specific to the issuance of a technologically sound and regulatorily compliant stable token, something along those lines, because that's a pretty finite group of enterprises in the world right now.
Yeah, I think that's. I think that would probably work, because you want to have an open door, but you don't want to throw the door open to everyone to the chairman's thoughts on that.
Comments from the commissioners? So you're looking for some sort of qualifier. Would it be something along the lines of a firm or bidder that provides, or?
How about, Mr. Chairman, and B, we say a qualified firm or bidder, a qualified firm or bidder subject to the rules of the commission that seeks to provide or provides.
Commissioner Naves, any thoughts there? Seeks is a pretty broad term. Intends would imply a bit more intent, intentionally.
I'm fine with intents. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the governor. I want to make sure that we are not opening the door to potential interpretation in a way that it would defeat the processes that have been put in place and potentially create confusion as to the requirements, to the active existing requirements, and what it is that someone must display in order to be qualified. That's my biggest concern, is ensuring that, having worked in tech companies for over 20 years, understanding product roadmaps is really interesting because companies may put in their product roadmap that I'll be launching a certain feature within 3 months by the end of this quarter. And then, the industry changes, plans change, and that plan now is pushed out 2 more quarters, potentially a year. So the 6 to 8 can then become a little bit of a muddy situation whereby, well, we plan to because it's on our roadmap, we just don't know when it's going to be, then it becomes confusing. So I just want to make sure that by the changes that we're implementing, we are not inviting potential, concerns that could entail, disputes to the regulations or anything that we're doing right now. That's just my thoughts there. I just want to make sure that that's not the direction that we're going.
I guess the
Thank you, Commissioner Naves. Commissioner Meyer.
I'm wondering whether or not if we set a qualified firm or bidder, a qualified firm by adherence to the commission's regulations or policies by a qualified bidder, then intends. Then you get the sorted out, to your point, Commissioner Navis, but it does no. I guess there's got to be something in the rules or something where we haven't closed the door and we're only going to deal with these people. And I know we want to look at flexibility in the future, but I just don't see the flexibility baked in this cake right now. But if it's there, let me know, and we're done with the discussion.
Director.
Through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, my concern with calling, I understand what we're trying to go with the wording there to call them a qualified firm or bidder, but I would keep in mind that the intent of this chapter is to qualify the parties, right? So I think that would be kind of a little bit, I hate to use the word self-defeatist, but I understand where the thrust is. We're trying to kind of firm up, oh, that's also redundant, I guess. We're trying to bolster the groups that would be interested in doing this. So it's not, again, anyone off the street, but these are, experienced organizations. Just trying to think through some adjectives here, but I forgot my thesaurus at home.
Maybe we just say a firm or bidder that can provide services rather than a firm or bidder that provides service. Because if you say they already provide services, it's we don't have anybody providing services. So I'm just yeah.
Governor, if I may.
Let me recognize Commissioner Pope, then Commissioner Naves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have a question in a similar vein on another section of this, but I was just going to say that you may, a firm or bidder that has an interest in providing services, you may change the wording to that, but as you're going to see in my next question after this, sometimes words are hard for me. I'm an accountant, not an attorney. So if Commissioner Naves has any better suggestions, I'm happy to listen to those too.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Naves.
Thank you. Sorry, David, I didn't see your hand raised. Apologize. So again, I just want to make sure that we're reading the full sentence. So if you bear with me, is this section 3B? This is the one that we're speaking about, right? Ongoing submission of statements of qualifications.
So, I think it's section 4B, where it says a firm or bidder.
Yes. So it says a firm or bidder that provides services related to the development, deployment, or management of Wyoming stable token may submit a detailed statement of qualifications and performance data to the commission. Am I reading the correct sentence? Is that the sentence? I
That
just want
is
to
the
make sure.
sentence.
Okay, thank you. All right. So what we're trying to do with this is to say that the firm or bidder that is going to submit a statement of qualification must be providing that service at the time in which the statement of qualification is submitted. Again, we are not looking for someone who has a future product or service. Is someone who has the product or service at the time in which they submit their statement of qualifications. That doesn't mean, Kurt, that we're saying you can never come back again. We're saying is when you do have that ready, you can submit that to us. What we cannot do here is accept a submission for a future product, as I stated earlier, a future feature that we don't know that is actually going to be available. Should we actually approve that vendor for provision of said services? So when that person comes, they should have the service available at that moment, not a future service, because again, we don't know when that service will be available. And we cannot make decisions about vendor qualification based on a product roadmap that may change.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I think we can clear this up now, is that basically you say a firm or bidder that provides services related to the development, deployment, or management of a stable token currently. And then you put, or provide services to a Wyoming stable token, to the Wyoming stable token.
Can you state that sentence again, Kurt, please, from top,
So,
beginning to end, please?
Basically, I bifurcate the bidder, or the firm. And first of it says the firm or bidder that provides services related to the development, deployment, or management of a stable token, any stable token currently, and may currently provide services to the Wyoming stable token.
And Treasurer, I understand the intent,
Yeah.
but it's complicated language. I'm wondering if Commissioner Naves, as a substitute, this gets to the same intent. In order for a firm, so it's in order for a firm or bidder to provide services related to the development, deployment, or management of a Wyoming stable token, they will submit a detailed statement of qualifications and performance data to the commission.
That should be Roman at 6, then. Or
No,
Roman at
I'm
5.
just substituting I'm changing the language of the first sentence.
Oh,
In other words, what I'm saying is you've got to have that in place in order to provide services related to the development, deployment, and management. It assumes a priori that you have, and you have to demonstrate.
yeah. And that takes care of one thing, but I think this is basically subsection B is primarily to provide for somebody that's already providing the services. So I'm just thinking maybe.
But I'm saying, what I'm saying, Mr. Treasurer, is that
any.
anyone
Okay.
who can demonstrate that they can provide services related to development, deployment, or management of the Wyoming stable token just has to submit a detailed statement of those qualifications and performance data to the commission. So anyone that can that can provide those can do that. And I
Yeah,
was
I
wondering
like-
if that met
Yeah.
what you were trying to get at with the language, Commissioner Flaves, and then it allowed for rolling development, because anybody who can meet those qualifications can submit.
So again, what we're trying to do here, sorry, my lack of formalities, Anthony's a lot better on this than I am, but just to make sure that we're addressing here, so we're trying to address is that someone that is currently not a part of the vendor or the approved vendor list, but we would like to be considered, we would like to submit their statement of qualifications and performance for the commission's review. Is that what we're trying to do with this sentence, Anthony? Yes?
Through the chair, that is my interpretation, my
Yeah.
volume.
Okay, so I think maybe, Governor, what we do here is say a firm or bidder that currently provides services related to the development, deployment, or management of a stable token may submit a detailed statement of qualifications and performance data to the commission. That way, we're not saying that is someone that just now provides services to the commission, because the Wyoming stable token would be part of the vendor list, right? So it's someone with somebody else that provides services in the stable token industry, but those services must be presently provided, not a future product roadmap. Kurt, does that help with the clarity that you're looking for?
Yeah, it does, but I was just thinking the language that the governor came up with is great, but to preserve what I think you were trying to do in B, I would just make it a Romanet 5, and or maybe go up and make it a Romanet 1, and then everything else follows the same way down and renumber, because then it makes it clear in the outset, you know, who can actually be a qualified list for the commission to develop and adopt and maintain a list. So it essentially qualifies everybody in the stack and leaves B alone. And so I'm just looking at that might be, rather than just saying you're only doing it in these circumstances, is that those are the only people that you need to talk to, which I think is what you've done now. I think that's your general practice. You went out, you had the whole universe, and you qualified them. And so anybody can submit, you know, the qualifications that they have, and if they meet it, then they go ahead and go down to what is now 1, 2, 3, 4, and subsequently. Because I think it just puts in rules what you have done today. So they you know, anybody that has qualifications may submit.
Commissioner, I think Commissioner Naves, I think the issue here is how to provide access, and maybe that's implicit in the first.
Because it is based on criteria adopted by the commission, but the criteria then, if we haven't adopted it by commission, I'm not sure we're going to adopt it by policy or we're going to adopt it by rules. I think if we put the governor's language up front in the first part, we adopt it by rules. Otherwise, it's criteria, which is more or less policy, so it could change. But it just depends on whether you want it locked and loaded in the rules or just a policy adopted by criteria. So.
I'm sorry, Kurt, I didn't understand that, but Governor, you were saying something else?
No, I just, what I'm concerned about is the language as drafted could be interpreted that we are only dealing with the people that we are dealing with.
Yeah.
And so nobody else need apply. And I think that's the concern
Mhm.
is to be able to say that these are our qualifications, and if you meet them, you know, if you've developed a product, you can submit, and then we'll give you the same consideration.
That makes sense. So if we change B to say a firm or bidder that, and we add the word currently, provide services related to the development, deployment, or management of a, and we strike Wyoming and we make lowercase stable coin or stable token, whatever the word we want to use, may submit a detailed statement of qualifications and performance data to the commission.
All right.
Because then that way you're talking about a stable coin can be any stable coin in the world, not a Wyoming. But again, the provision of service must be present at the time of submission to the commission. Would that work?
I think that would help.
Yeah. Because then that opens the door to anyone who's working with stable coins at that moment to apply, not just the Wyoming stable token.
Director.
Through the chair, Commissioner Novis, I would support that. And that's particularly my role, so part of it's not. But I think that's the right thrust of where we want to go with this and what was the original intent here. And I would also just kind of throw it back in the commission's court, since we are trying to, again, get across the concept that these are groups, firms, bidders that are currently providing services to stable tokens, stable coins.
Right.
Do we want to go as far as saying that these things, to be qualified, you need to be working on, as we've said in the most recent exercises we've done, a stable coin currently in production or with a main net deployment? Because again, I think that was a big, kind of topic of discussion for us of late about, when things are considered to be built and deployed. So I would put it again in the commission's court, but I think that would be perhaps one last wording change that we might want to consider.
Right. So Commissioner Novis, can you repeat what your suggestion was? I thought it was very elegant.
Thank you. So it's going to say a firm or bidder that, and you include the word currently, provide services related to the development, deployment, or management of a, strike Wyoming, make lowercase stable, lowercase token, and then leave the rest, may submit a detailed statement of qualifications and performance data to the commission.
So a firm or bidder that provides services to development, deployment, or management of a stable token may submit a detailed qualifications and yada yada to the commission. Okay, all right.
Yeah, the other word, Kurt, that I said was currently before provides. So again, it doesn't become a future
Okay,
product, but currently they have that ability on the day that they submit the application, because it's critical for our assessment of their meeting the criteria, right? They need to currently provide. We cannot be bound to a product roadmap that we have no control over.
and here's a short three-worder that I thought of in Romanet 1, is that you develop, adopt, or maintain, and then put or add to an approved list.
Commissioner Pope.
I actually had a similar comment on Romanet I, in which I believe that's what you're referring to, correct? It just appears to me to be kind of a singular act in the original wording, and I had different wording because I think add to, I'm not sure that's complete enough, so I'll throw out my wording since we're all.
Okay,
let's try it.
and Commissioner Pope, let me, I think if we've come close to a decision on Romanet 4B, let's deal with that and then look at Romanet I, if that makes sense, just so we aren't talking across multiple.
Let's do that.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I would move the adoption of the amendment which Commissioner Naves suggested. And so for complete accuracy, we'll repeat it one more time for the record. How's that sound? Slowly.
Sounds good. Okay, one more time. So the sentence will read, a firm or bidder that currently provides services related to the development, deployment, or management of a stable token, lowercase, may submit a detailed statement of qualifications and performance data to the commission.
Is there a second for the treasurer's motion?
So-
It's been seconded by the auditor. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, we have that on the table. I will now entertain amendments.
Okay, Romanet I.
Well, if it's voted on, it's passed, right?
No, we're just passing the amendment.
Oh, you're just passing the amendment,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, I
yeah.
thought you said you moved the whole
Oh,
thing.
no, no, I
Okay,
just moved
okay,
the
so we will
amendment,
go to a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 That 4B is now amended, and now we'll go on to the amendment for I. Let's have the discussion there.
Okay, let me go ahead and read what I came up with. Develop, adopt, and maintain an approved list of candidate blockchains that a Wyoming stable token may launch on based on criteria adopted by the commission, along with procedures for identifying additions or deletions based on changing compliance with such criteria.
You'd have to change the compliance. You'd have to change the criteria.
No, changing compliance with such criteria. So what I believe is that there are candidate blockchains that will become compliant with our criteria as time goes on. And that, I believe, was the intent of this, was to be able to add to our current list. And so we have to have a procedure for identifying any additions or deletions to that list based on changing compliance with such criteria. So there may be, I understand this is a very rare circumstance, but there may be candidate blockchains that drop off the list later on because of activity and such. So I don't want to restrict us to actually only adding to the list. I want to give us the ability to do both and have it based on subjective, objective criteria like we do now.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm just thinking that, could you just say after maintain, add or remove candidates from an approved list of candidate, and just say that? Because we already have criteria adopted by commission. To adopt, maintain, comma, add, comma, or remove from an approved list of candidate blockchains.
Mr. Chairman, I'm fine with that. As I said, I'm not the wordsmith here. What I wanted to do is present what my issues were, and if the commission believes that that is a better and simpler way to do it, I'm all for that.
The only thing that, Mr. Chairman, that I was concerned about is that the language at the end that was, I don't think it was clear to me that it was blockchains. You know, I mean, it's based on criteria, but it didn't seem, and I'm not an English professor, I wish I was sometimes, but, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, we can have a war of who is worse at wordsmithing. But I'm fine with that if it works for everyone.
So, Mr. Treasurer, I think Commissioner Pope, could you just walk through that again, make sure that we have the language?
Go ahead, it's on you.
Okay, my original thought on it, or Treasurer Myers? Because my original thought was develop, adopt, and maintain an approved list of candidate blockchains that a Wyoming stable token may launch on based on criteria adopted by the commission with procedures for identifying additions or deletions based on changing compliance with such criteria, or that could be ongoing compliance with such criteria. I think changing works better because if someone becomes compliant, we need to recognize that.
And I agree with you, but I'm not sure if that's what we're saying. Changing based on the qualifications. Got any English majors in here?
Well, and I guess, Mr. Treasurer and Director, I'll recognize you in just a second. And your language also is pretty elegant, but, Director.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly understand where Commissioner Pope is coming from, and I agree. We do expect that change will become in scope, and if you have a hack or you lose users or your market cap drops, you could fall off the list too. And I would expect that to be part of the criteria set by the commission. But perhaps the Occam's razor is best here. Maintain, to me, would include additions and deletions. Or any other just general kind of management of a list. I'm not sure if we need much more than that.
Change the criteria.
So, Mr. Treasurer, if I understood your language is develop, adopt, maintain, add, or remove from an approved list.
Yeah, and actually, I like Commissioner Pope's language is, it would be develop, adopt, it would be, develop, adopt, maintain, or provide for additions or deletions to an approved list. And I think the changing compliance and that, I think that's captured under the criteria adopted by the commission. And they could, because I don't think you have to change.
So I think the intent here is to say that you can either exist on or add to the list, or you can be dropped if you don't meet the requirements. So,
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just address Director Apollo's statement, I totally agree with him. I love Occam's razor. I love it to be as simple as possible. The only thing I see is this appears to be a kind of a singular list that we're looking at when it says develop, adopt, and maintain a singular approved list. And I want to give, and I just want to make sure that it's clear that we want to be able to add and remove as the circumstances.
so
I agree wholeheartedly with Commissioner Pope. However you guys want to say it, it's fine with me.
So the language that we're settling on is provide, what was the language you had that for after develop, adopt, maintain, and allow for the addition and or deletion from an approved, is that what it was? Or
Governor,
Commissioner Navas?
could I potentially offer a simpler word?
Yep,
And
that would
this
be great.
is, what about develop, adopt, update, and maintain? Update means that you can take things on, put things in, take things off, That makes it simpler. Maybe the word update is one that we can use there.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
All right, I would
Chairman,
entertain
I
a
would like
motion
that.
to that effect.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Yeah.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
I
Okay, that motion carries. We are now, if there are no other changes, we're now able to move the Chapter 6 ongoing submission of statement of qualifications.
It was painful but great work, so I would move that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
I
That motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, maybe just a re-clarification of the regular rulemaking process as far as what folks can expect, being able to comment on that or timelines, that sort of thing.
Sure. Do you want to handle that, Director?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Racines, it would be the first time hitting the big red button on submit, but we've done the emergency procurement process a couple times. To be clear, again, all of the documentation for submission of regular rulemaking on my side is prepared. Both the clean versions of documents, strike through and underline versions of the documents, all the different filings have to happen, but this is a less direct process than emergency rulemaking, intentionally so. It's on the books, on our books for potentially ever. This is a process that needs to go through the governor's office, Secretary of State's office, the Attorney General's office, although we've worked them along the way, Management Council. So well, I don't know if I could repeat all of the steps off the top of my head. I do have a couple of charts on my hard drive that
So,
should be able to.
There's an initial 45 days of public comment, at which point then either if there's substantial public comment, there's the possibility of extending that public comment for another 45 days. I think our interest here is to be fairly expeditious, but that doesn't preclude the fact that if there's good reason, we wouldn't extend it. But at that point, then it's submitted to the Attorney General's office, the Management Council, and the governor ultimately when he signs the rules. Those rules come into effect.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the clarification. Yes, and the 45-day public comment period is a big piece that I definitely should have mentioned. And again, there are some time gates on both sides of that as well.
Right.
So this is not, going to happen overnight, but I think this is, fairly straightforward. And again, this is intended to open up the funnel, not tighten it. So I would hope that the community and the public would recognize that as a way for us to move forward with more energy and intent here than less.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you, I would quickly move to the.
Do you, your memo recommended 2 motions. Is that what you're moving to next?
Mr. Chairman, I believe so. That would be, the second motion would be pertaining to the uniform procedures, fees, costs, and charges for inspecting, copying, and producing public records.
Correct.
So you've got 3 documents in front of you. 2 of them are informational. One is the initial set of rules promulgated by A&I in 2016. And you could see in this document, again, they're definitions, of course, but the assessment of fees for clerical time and for non-electronic copies of content and records. Commissioner Mai, to your earlier point, there is a section here, Section 5, subsection D, about producing electronic copies. So that is all in here. Flipping over quickly to the next document, this is the rules from the Attorney General's office that were promulgated back in 2017. And this essentially just leverages, this is essentially a set of rules to leverage A&I's rules. So you can see that, for these rules are incorporated by reference in Section 2B and so on. And ours are modeled, this is Chapter 1, again, uniform procedures, fees, costs, charges for expecting, copying, producing public records. We have our authority as a stable token commission for rulemaking. I also referenced the authority in the Wyoming Public Records Act there. And we adopt the uniform procedures as well that A&I has put forth and promulgated. We reference the Secretary of State's website where the rules live, for lack of a better term. And then again, we say that the commission has determined that incorporation of the full text of these rules would be cumbersome or inefficient given the length or nature of the rules. The incorporation by reference does not include any latter amendments or additions of the incorporated matter beyond the applicable date identified in subsection A of this section, which is September 6, 2016. And then Romanet 3, the incorporated rules are maintained at the Attorney General's office and made available for public inspection and copying at the same location. I realize, reading that out loud, and I will turn to Mr. Kenny quickly here. I believe this should be either the Commission's office in Romanet 3, not the Attorney General's office. Maybe we copied the homework a little too closely on that one. Or it would be the Secretary of State's office where they would ultimately fall, but being that this is based on the AG's version and it says the AG, I would expect this to actually, should say the Stable Token Commission. And I'm getting a nod.
Mr. Kenny, do you want to speak to that at all? Yeah, you're just nodding in assent. The director did mention either the commission's office or the Secretary of State. Do you have a opinion about that? Commission's office. Okay? Thank you. So with that change noted, let's, are there any comments or discussions? You know, and Mr. Treasurer, just sort of as a way of reminding people about why these rules were put in place the way they were, I think to the Unclaimed Property Department, where your office is required to be able to, free of charge, be able to return to people their property that might have inadvertently been lost, and yet firms use the FOIA process to understand what those things are and who the people are so that they can then contact them and take a percent for themselves. So these rules are not, you know, a reaction to scrutiny or anything else. They are simply good business practice in sensitive areas.
And it takes a lot of time, Mr. Chairman, when you have an attorney in there based on our contracts and stuff with our investment people and redacting and making sure all that gets done. And if you don't do it right and something gets out that your investment manager doesn't like, then
Yeah.
then you you know, I guess poisoned the well sometimes.
Yep. If there is no discussion, I would entertain a motion. Thank you, Commissioner Pope. Is there a second? Second. It's been seconded by Auditor Racinas. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Director, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just jotting my notes down here. Sweet. Good. Okay, next up on the agenda, and I will note that it is currently 10:30. I do think we're trying to wind this one down before 11:30. So I will continue moving along here. So on to procurement. So we have worked through our request for qualifications. These, so there's a memo in front of you, the request for qualifications results memo. What we'd like to do here is approve qualified vendors for RFQs 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. And then I'll get into more detail about this, but I think we need to reopen the submission window for RFQ 4 related to reserves management. This was done under, again, our authority to procure services and the emergency procurement rules that are currently in force. And to dive into, well, we'll do a little bit of recap first. So we kicked off 7 concurrent requests for qualification on November 20th. 21st, they were approved by the commission. And then on the 22nd, we launched those. In totality, we received 202 submissions, 58 of which were vendor registrations. And that means there was 144 RFQ submissions left to get through. And I've tabulated the volume of submissions per RFQ here at the bottom of page 1. I will quickly note that maybe that's a little bit misleading because of these RFQs, some of them only have one function that we're advertising for. So RFQ 3, 5, 6, 7, all of those are fundamentally one function, whereas RFQ 2 has 5 and RFQ 4 had 8. So they were a bit bigger in that capacity. And if we turn the page, we'll start breaking that down. But yeah, I wanted to kind of get the stats up there first. If we head over to page 2, this is where we get into the analysis of who was deemed to be qualified vendors coming out of our discussions with the working group that was reviewing the data. So we'll just go through them quickly. For RFQ 1.1, Smart Contract Development, qualified vendors would include Bridge Ventures, Fireblocks, Layer 0 Labs, and Miston Labs. RFQ 1.2 for validator node infrastructure would include Artifact Systems, Ava Labs, Block Daemon, Blocktime Financial, Fireblocks, Off-Chain Labs, and QuickNode. For a centralized exchange, there was only one party deemed to be qualified, that's blockchain.com Incorporated. For 2.2, that's custodial wallets, we deemed Anchorage Digital Bank, North America, blockchain.com, Cordial Systems, Defense, and Fireblocks to be qualified. For 2.3, mobile applications, that was Ava Labs and blockchain.com. For customer support, blockchain.com, Fireblocks, and SS&C Technologies. RFQ 2.5, which is marketing, Ava Labs and blockchain.com. Moving on to RFQ 3.1, which is on-chain analytics, we had a number of qualified parties here. Those would include BlockTrace LLC, Chainalysis Incorporated, Chainalysis Government Solutions LLC, both of them applied, Elliptic Inc., Merkle Science Americas Incorporated, Solidus Labs, and TRM Labs. For internal controls, qualified parties include Block Gemini Technologies, Deloitte & Touche LLP, Ernst & Young LLP, KPMG LLP, Kroll LLC, and the network firm. For 6.1, which is financial audit and attestation, qualified parties there were Grant Thornton, KPMG, and the network firm. And then for 7.1, ecosystem intelligence, qualified there were BlockTrace LLC, Chainalysis Government Solutions LLC, Cube Security Inc., Deloitte & Touche LLP, Inca Digital Federal LLC, Merkle Science Americas Inc., Sayari Labs Inc., and Solidus Labs Inc. So again, a lot of content there, and I didn't necessarily run the percentages on how many qualified. We've been doing a lot of work on this over the course of the last week, but that was what we derived from the metrics that were put forth, the questions that we asked, the responses to those questions, applicability of services, and our review of any attachments, documents that were provided by the teams, so on and so forth. Much more to say about this, but I want to just pause for any questions from the commissioners.
Questions? Commissioner Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Apollo. Under RFQ 5.1, 6.1, and 7.1, well, mainly 5.1 and 6.1, KPMG and the network firm have submitted proposals for both. I think in any ongoing RFP from them, we would need to request a statement as to how, if they are selected for multiple RFPs, how they would avoid an independence issue, since one is a consulting function and the other is audit and attest. So that's a comment more than a question.
Well, through the chair, Commissioner Pope, I had the same thought. We do, again, see Deloitte across some of these as well, although there would be both technically on the advisory side, right? To be quite honest, I think that, similar to how we expect consortia to form, we wouldn't want to dictate, who should be working with who. I don't know if we should be dictating who should be applying to which RFP. I also don't know if that means we should tell them that, pick one or the other. I don't know if that doesn't sound appropriate either, because essentially just the converse of the same problem. So my gut is if they wanted to apply for both, they would have to pick one or the other, but that would be incumbent on them to make that determination.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Pope.
That's, you're absolutely correct in that, but if they do apply for both and somehow want to perform both functions, we would need a submission that includes how they will avoid that potential independence issue.
Commissioner Meyer.
Yeah, and I think maybe what you do in the RFQs is that you just say that, if you have applied for more than one of the functions that we requested, please, I guess, tell us which one you feel you have the most qualifications for, and and whether or not, if you want to do more than one, any conflict or interest in, doing those, do you think that exists, and what you can do to do it? But just kind of have a blanket language in all of the RFQs that kind of brings that out, because you've got some different folks that want to mix and match, and you have some of these people, I guess, that want to have a consortium. So, I don't know if you need any thing about a consortium language in any of that stuff, or your partners, or or whether you want to get any information about who they'd rather partner with, if in a deal. I don't know if you go down that road, because you don't necessarily want to have them have winners and losers, but it'd be nice to have some, I guess, maybe some leading questions that might lead you to understanding who might work the best together, but I don't know how to really phrase those. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Director, Commissioner Pope and Commissioner Reiner, it seems to me in RFP, there's issues we would analyze after they submit their proposals.
Through the chair, I think that's absolutely correct. And Commissioner Meyer, to your point, we do have a carve out in the RFPs, which are being hand delivered to you right now, or more of them. I think you already have some of them, but there is sections. We'll go through it. Essentially, I'm putting the cart in front of the horse momentarily here. We did leverage A&I's template for the RFP. We don't want to change too much, but obviously there is different schematics for us with consortium and multiple different concurrent RFPs. So there are some significant changes to the first section. Consortium are mentioned there, multiple submissions are mentioned there, and we'll come back to it in just a few minutes to say if we want to add, a line here about conflicts of interest. That would be wise.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, have you addressed Commissioner Pope's concerns as far as conflicts and stuff in the RFPs as they're currently drafted?
Through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, that's a great question. I'd like to think the answer is yes, but it always pays to go through this with a fine-tooth comb as we review it together, right?
Thank you.
Very good. Commissioner Naves or Commissioner Revelle, any comments?
None right now, Governor. Thank you.
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you. No comments.
Okay. Commissioner Racines, any? Well, so
Keep
we
marching.
are at that point.
We're getting there. There's a couple more things
Sure.
on here to quickly get through, Mr. Chairman. One section on here is notification. So now that the review is complete, and this is from our procurement rules, we do have a shall notify our pre-qualification applicants. So whether you were qualified or not, you will be hearing from us hopefully in the next 30 hours. 30 hours, hopefully by the end of the week. And then if your firm, company did not qualify, you will get a reason for the decision. And also if, I think I'm flipping over to the top of page 4 now, a potential proposer denied pre-qualification status after filing an application for pre-qualification status may request the commission to review the application decision in line with Chapter 2, Section 6 of the procurement rules. So again, I want to call out specifically, this process is well-defined, it is transparent, it is on our website, it is available. If people have any questions, do feel free to look into that. And of course, you can reach out to, we now have the stable token at wyo.gov email inbox set up as well. For those who did qualify, those vendors will be invited to a RFP portal where we will run the next stage of this process. And we will talk about what that looks like in just a few moments. Before I do that, I do want to revisit RFQ4, which is for reserves management. This is one where we had the most moving pieces. And as a result of that, we had a number of firms that in one way, shape, or form conveyed their intent and desire to be part of the process. We did say if you intend to bid as a consortia, all of the constituent parties do need to register individually. And that became, towards the tail end of the timeline, a bit of a hodgepodge of firms that, perhaps submitted on behalf of an organization or perhaps on behalf of a fund that had multiple parties. And we'd hoped there'd be more of a sign-off or sign of assent for those parties coming together. But net where we ended up was you had firms that we know can likely be qualified who, because one party submitted on their behalf, would not be. And that happened at a volume that when we spoke to the working group about this, the kind of consensus amongst the group was that we should probably go ahead and re-advertise RFQ4. Also because, just to be completely candid, right? I mean, every part of this is important, but when we talk about who's gonna be holding dollars on behalf of the state of Wyoming, that's pretty much right up there with smart contract security. So what we think we should do, and there will be a timeline to this, we'll get to in a second, we should reopen or perhaps re-advertise is the better term of art here, the RFQ4 qualification. To be clear, we don't feel there's anything on our side, so we're not going to change any of the criteria. It'll be the same forms, but because we're going to open the funnel back up, we'll say existing submitters, if they want to update or resubmit their vendor registration or RFQs, they should be well within the right to do so. Potential vendors who are listed as part of consortia, but for whom vendor registration forms were not completed or data was not captured, they'll be able to submit. And then we need to, just in terms of parity and fairness, open the funnel up for any new parties who did not get in. It will be open to pretty much anyone to, again, submit their own qualifications. So this one is a little bit out of line with the rest, but again, we really feel that we need to cast a wide net on this one and make sure that everything is up to snuff and according to plan, given the import of managing the funds on behalf of the state of Wyoming.
I guess generally, do you think the non-subjective things that we put in there, and I don't think we had too many subjective, qualifications, but the numbers, were they reasonable? Because we were kind of bouncing around on what the minimum should be there for different reasons, and I'm just wondering whether or not we hit the bull's mark, or at least an 18 or a 19 on the dartboard.
Through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, if, I don't have all the data for me this very second, but just going on memory here, I think if I started too low, maybe what was put forth in the submissions was too high, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Good. Further comments or discussion? Well, I think we have two matters to consider here. One is approve the qualified vendors for RFQs 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. And if you want to handle that as one motion, that would be great. And then we can look to re-advertise RFQ 4 for submissions according to the timeline proposed below, or we can capture that all in one motion. But
Mr. Chairman, without objection, I would capture it all in one motion, as you stated.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Meyer, if that's the case, I would like to just quickly discuss what the timeline is.
Sure.
It is the holidays. I would like to just make sure that if we are going to be talking through some of this, that teams are available. So for example, we have on here that if we have RFQ4 reopened as early as today, it would be open until December 27th. That would give the team some time to review the submissions, and we would look to have a 30-minute special meeting to simply approve RFQ4. We could do this virtually like we've done in the past with some of the special meetings, to approve the qualified vendors and RFP4 as well. But I also understand that that's a few days from New Year's, people might be traveling, et cetera.
and I believe that's all captured in the motion. And so what is that something that Commissioner Pope, you want to address?
When that part is addressed, I would like to remove RFP 6 from initial consideration. there are a series of technical issues that I have with that RFP, and I think we just need to discuss it prior to an overall approval of RFP 6.
Through the chair, Commissioner Pope, I think you're talking about the RFP and not the RFQ results.
Oh, I thought, my apologies. I thought Mr. Chairman had requested that we consider all of the RFPs right now, so I apologize, sir.
Yeah, no, it was the RFQs. So. Yeah, if that's the case, then you'll withdraw.
Yes, I am withdrawing that
Okay, thank you.
question.
Further discussion?
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been seconded by the auditor. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, that motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Director, you'll publish the timeline and everything else on the website, is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. I do believe it's already published on the website, perhaps. I know all these documents are, and we do have the, both the RFQ Information Center and the RFP Information Center going up, if it's not up already or public already, so that it all should be captured.
All right, I just want to make sure that people know where to get that information. Thank you, Stephanie.
Excellent. So moving on to the request for proposal. First thing you should have is an RFP issuance memo. Thank you. Which I am trying to find in my stack. You have, not that one. Do we have the, pardon me one second. Mr. Chairman, it might seem as if we are missing a hard copy document, so we'll be pulling a, fortunately, rare audible on our side. I will go ahead and pull it up on the screen and share it there.
Okay.
Just give me one moment to sign into the Zoom and we'll get it going.
We are looking for a memo. We'll be getting up here in just a second.
It's a little strange to be staring at the back of my head. Okay.
Okay. All right, so hopefully that is at least partially legible. So similar to our RFQ memo, we have a RFP issuance memo. And we would look with this discussion to approve the RFPs numbers 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7, although perhaps there are some ideas on that already. And then if, you know, again, we're doing this under the authority in our rules and our statute. And for background here, so to keep in mind, the request for qualifications process, we now have qualified vendors that have just been qualified and approved as such by the commission. The qualified vendors will be invited to the request for proposal. So that is our next step. We already talked about the RFPs that are being issued for approval: token development support, token listing and support, on-chain analytics, internal controls, financial audit and attestation. And we had already de-scoped RFP 4, which is reserves management. In terms of access, again, the vendors who successfully qualified during the RFQ process will be invited to participate in the RFP. They'll be given access to the RFP Info Center, which will function through our Notion page, much like we did with the RFQs, which worked out well for us. And then they can find all the documentation they need there for the RFPs, as well as contact information for the other qualified vendors. The goal behind that is we know that some of these organizations want to form consortia. We can't tell them who should talk to who, so we'll put them all in kind of the same zone and let them come together. There is also, similar to how we did with the RFQs, we will have a Q&A section there. If there are questions from the qualified vendors, they will be able to ask those questions in kind of a pseudo-anonymous way. They ask us, it goes into a portal, we kind of sanitize the questions, post them back on the page with our response. So no one knows who's asking the question, but everyone has parity and access to the same responses. And then in terms of the roadmap, this follows the cadence we had talked about in previous discussions. We would look to get the RFQ notifications and the Info Center live between today and tomorrow. That would open up the submission and the Q&A period. We would have a vendor Q&A deadline by December 31st, which means if they've got questions, we want to have them in by that date. We'll have evaluation criteria distributed by the commission by December 31st. We'll come back to that in a moment. For the Q&A, the commission will have all of its responses due to the qualified vendors by January 6th. And then we will have the vendor submissions, the proposals will be due January 30th. We begin our evaluation period internally January 31st. We would have oral presentations and interviews with an evaluation committee through February of 2025. And then the evaluation period would end on February 27th, which is when our monthly meeting would be, followed by award notifications thereafter. I am also noting that there is no plug under my desk and my laptop is now on battery saver mode. So the comedy of errors has begun, and apologies. This is, okay, thank you. And while that happens, I will quickly, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. We're full of surprises, right? So
We'd be on top of that one.
yeah. So qualified vendors are encouraged to review all materials thoroughly and stick to the deadlines. If you do not hit those deadlines, we will not be extending them. We don't expect to. One quick note that I don't know if it made it here, but it's on the website. And commissioners, you have this in front of you, is a MOU page. Again, this is nothing binding, but we've talked in the past about wanting to make sure that potential vendors had a good idea of how we operate here. And as a result, there are certain things you want to make sure they're aware of and are asking them to acknowledge that they're aware of before they submit anything. One, of course, is the procurement rules, which we link to, and that's what's governing this whole process. This confidentiality piece here, we want to communicate that because we are a public entity, at the end of the day, ultimately speaking, pretty much anything we receive will be subject to the Wyoming Public Records Act or a Freedom of Information Act. Now, there are certain exceptions to things like trade secrets, privileged information, and confidential commercial financial data. And we've called that out, but we do want to be very upfront. We had a number of organizations ask us to sign NDAs during this process. We told them that's not really something that we do. And we hope that this communicates well how data will be treated on our side. Obviously, we'll keep everything, internal with best practices, but at the end of the day, there can be a compulsion to divulge information. We also have in here a diligence request, for lack of a better term. It's possible that these vendors, these qualified vendors, will need information from us to onboard as a client. As a state, this is less of a concern than I had when I was running private companies. That being said, this is more for expediency than anything else. We don't want to be in a position where we engage a counterparty and then we need to spend some cycles. We're just waiting for data to be processed. If they know they need something from us now, let's just address it now. And of course, a template contract. This is already on our website for the RFQs, but I will quickly mention that we want vendors to know that any contract we sign is going to be on Wyoming state paper. There will be insurance requirements therein. The venue will be Wyoming. Our sovereign immunity does not apply to them. And then they would acknowledge that. We collect some information about names and titles. We have a verification statement on here, and that's that. Just wanted to call that out. Nothing, I think, to approve there, but wanted to make sure that was clear. And then back to the RFP memo. When it comes to the evaluation here, what we have done is include in the RFP itself as an appendix some high-level criteria, or metrics rather. The goal for us will be to work with the evaluation committees that will be put together to come up with the very specific rubrics and then provide those to qualified vendors by that December 31st date, when some of the other pieces that are associated with this program will all come together at once. And then we would have the recommendation to approve the RFPs as drafted or amended. And at that point, I would be happy to go through these, or if there's any preliminary feedback, even on structure. It sounds like we may have some discussion already to have. So I will turn over to the commission. Thank you.
Commissioners, questions, comments?
Does the
Mr. Treasurer.
AG have to go over all of these? Or not? I'm just curious. Or whether they have or not.
Well, these are, again, based on the template from A&I. We've made some modifications there, and not to put anyone on the spot, but
Devin's over there.
he is over there.
I think he was.
Sir, would you have any comments on the RFPs as they currently stand? Nope.
Okay. Very good.
Okay. Commissioner Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On RFP 6 specifically, I have, accounting has its own arcane language, and that language is used in the development of responses to RFPs and the consideration of RFPs by a potential vendor. And so I have to apologize. I had meant to go through this completely. I made my initial pass at about midnight a few nights ago, and have not had a chance to finish my pass. But I have about 30 potential edits in the scope and requirements of Appendix A that conforms it to technical language used within the accounting profession. So that's my only comment, and I'm happy to go through each of them, but I can't promise it's a comprehensive list at this point. So I don't know how we want to do that part of it.
So through the chair, if I may quickly, you are talking about Appendix A. So one of the things that we did for these documents, again, as one of the slight deviations structurally from whatever exists, is we've separated a lot of the conversation around scope and requirements and what we expect from the vendors into appendices, so that we could be a bit more tactical and modular about how we might want to edit those. And then the RFP, the body of the RFP itself, which is now sections 1 through 6, rather than 1 through 9, is standardized across all of them. So understood on Appendix A for RFP 6. One question I'll quickly ask again, I've got my eye on the clock. I know Commissioner Navas has about 10 minutes left. Chairman, we've got about 25 minutes left of your time. If that, would it at least be helpful to go through the bulk of the RFP proper before we get into the appendices where the specific?
Absolutely, yes. I saw how that was structured. I loved the structure of the RFPs and that those were standardized across the RFPs. And for the rest of the RFPs, that's the language in the appendices, I would most likely be fine with. But I think for RFP 6, it just needs quite a bit more work in the appendices do. And that's just it. So however we want to do that, I'm good with.
So let's walk through the bulk and then we can discuss what next.
Can do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So to open up, section 1 is the general request for proposals, starting with introduction and background. We do give some background about the commission itself, how it came to fruition. We talk about what the Wyoming Stable Token itself is and the opportunity at hand. In terms of stakeholders, we call out that this is meant to be a public good program for the state as a way to get money into the school foundation fund. And then we go on to the procurement section. So we call out that the purpose of this RFP is to solicit competitive proposals from vendors who can facilitate, again, these words, the development, deployment, and ongoing management of the Wyoming Stable Token while meeting the Commission's needs and expectations as described within this RFP. In terms of who's involved, again, these are qualified vendors who have gone through the RFQ process. We've made that determination. We call out the rules that have been promulgated by the Commission that govern this process. And again, the chapters of the rules that are in scope be 1, 2, 4, and 5, because chapter 3 is for the competitive bidding and proposals are a different beast. Getting into the submission of proposals, this I'll kind of walk through quickly because again, we had talked about some of the dates in the memo. But for us, again, we will start notifying the vendors immediately about their status. We do intend to publish the list of qualified vendors on the website. The access will be granted to them so they could get into the RFP portal. From a substance perspective, that's again, we've moved out scope and requirements, company details and operations, responsibilities and management, and the evaluation methodology to appendices to make it a little less muddied, at least in the body of the doc. We call out the MOU and why we put that in there that we just went through. We talk about the questions that are due by Tuesday, December 31st. MOUs will be submitted through the portal at Tuesday, December 31st as well. Goal there is we want to make sure that any of these qualified vendors, if they're not comfortable with anything we put forth, that they have questions, we want to know sooner rather than later, rather than, at the 11th hour of the process. We talk about the due date, and then we get into some of the funkier stuff. So again, we have multiple RFPs going live at once. There is some, perhaps we'll say, overlap between the functions of the vendors that would propose on them. And we've seen that with, again, RFP 5, 6, and even 7 to an extent. So we do say that qualified vendors may submit proposals for any RFP for which they were qualified. However, proposals must be submitted individually for each RFP. So we're clear about that. And then we've put some wording in here around the consortia. So given the breadth of services for which the Commission is seeking proposals, the Commission expects services to ultimately be delivered by multiple qualified vendors. As such, some number of qualified vendors may choose to form a consortium and propose a consolidated book of work across multiple functions within an RFP or across more than one RFP. For any proposals submitted by a consortium, and then we get to some of the finesse here. Again, qualified vendors have to submit individual proposals. There is one qualified vendor who would assume the role of a consortium lead and organize other qualified vendors into that kind of informal consortium, and then submit a memo, consortium memo, through the RFP portal that shall identify the vendors in the consortium, have signatures signing off and authorizing who's in it, so we know that everyone's assenting to be part of that process, summarize the functions that each qualified vendor will perform, include both individualized and consolidated fee structures, because in our rules, we are able, when we procure the services and award the bids, we are able to kind of piecemeal it as we see fit, for whatever works best for the state of Wyoming. So we will make sure that we understand from the collective and the individual side here, and then define why they are coming together as a consortium, what value add that brings. And real quick, Governor, I certainly appreciate your tech support, but I'm not sure that outlet works either. I appreciate it. And then, of course, in all caps here, the commission cannot and will not dictate which qualified vendors should partner to propose a consolidated book of work across multiple RFPs. Again, we are not dictating who's quarterbacking these processes. They have to figure that out on their own. We're not putting our thumb on the scale here. They need to take that upon themselves. And then the last thing in the section is withdrawal. We reserve the right to withdraw any RFP without cause any time before a contract has been fully signed and submitted. So going through all of that, I think we've covered a lot here, but again, I do want to quickly, through the chair, revisit Commissioner Pope, your point about the independence around certain things, and Treasurer Meyer, your kind of broader point around conflicts of interest. If that's something that you didn't hear in those bullet points, I think it would behoove us to maybe add something there that we can quickly add and just move on with that considered. Okay. It would seem to me, Mr. Chairman, that we are covered. So,
Director Apollo, sorry, had a quick question on that last question.
Sure, Commissioner Revelle.
Yeah, thank you. In regards to the qualified vendors that were just listed, if there is a commissioner that has a conflict of interest, either kind of personal or professional, how and when do we want to disclose that? I thought this would be a good time to ask with the AG's office present as well. Obviously, we would recuse ourselves from any of the selection process, but do we want to disclose potential conflicts of interest proactively?
through the chair, Commissioner Ville, I very much appreciate the question. I also appreciate the timing of the question. So what I would suggest, and again, as the commission, was that commissioners could just let myself know, and maybe if we want to tag in, just for coverage, some others, we could figure out what that composition looks like. But I'm aware of not only commissioners, but there will be certain team members, agency members as well, who would be conflicted on certain RFPs. So one of the reasons why we didn't put together the evaluation committees nor the evaluation criteria yet and kept it high level for the time being was because we didn't know who'd be involved and we didn't know if there would be these conflicts. Now that we know who was firmly going to be on that roster, I would expect that commissioners or team members who have vendor relationships, potential investments, what have you, we can coordinate that internally and then just make sure that anyone who has those conflicts would not, of course, not be on the evaluation committees proper, but also would not be involved in drafting the evaluation criteria rubric either, if that makes sense.
I think that does. I would, I actually would request of Devin if he could consider drafting a memo on conflict that could inform commissioners. That it seems to me that my understanding, and I guess Treasurer, you dealt with this too. My understanding of the law is perhaps not as strong as we might want to behave here in this commission. Because I think my understanding of the law, you can participate in a discussion, but you then notify of your conflict and don't participate in a vote. But in this particular circumstance, we may want to be a little more careful, I guess, in how we do that.
Yeah, I know in the legislative process, it's from my perspective, it's pretty weak as far as enforcement, because I recall one time when I was a I declared a conflict because my wife was a school teacher and the vote that was going to be cast would probably put about $10,000 in her pocket a year. And I thought, well, I've got a conflict. Well, I was summarily chastised, taken to the president's room with the management, with the rules committee. And they said, Kurt, you have to vote. And I says, well, I can't. And they said, well, we did the numbers. There's 19 people on the floor that have some relation to the educational system. And if you disallow all 19 of us to vote, we don't have a quorum. So there are circumstances where, it really conflicts you to have a conflict with some of the rules, and that's about as loose as I think you can get it. But, and I agree with the governor to the extent that we want to have an acute sense of propriety about how we operate, that we should probably have it a lot tighter than what you can get by with in the way that conflict laws are basically used in the state of Wyoming from time to time.
So, Mr. Kenny, is that something you could consider? And Commissioner Naves, is that something you would also, I see your hand raised, and would you also coordinate on that? But please go ahead, address the commission.
Thank you, Governor. Before I switch to phone, I will still be available just on my phone. Based on some of the questions that the commission has received for the process that has transpired to this date, as well as some social media engagements that we have received vis-a-vis the process that has taken place thus far, including regular, inquiries from some of our fellow legislators, I think is strongly recommended to have a clear conflict of interest policy that is driven by the Attorney General's office, and I'll be happy to partner with them to drive something for the commission's review, so that we have a process that is transparent and will not invite further, could invite, but we invite less scrutiny either by legislators or social media posts. So I would strongly advise that we put a policy in place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Pope.
just as an aside, I believe that the state of Wyoming itself puts out some materials on conflict of interest when serving on boards and commissions. And because I remember being required to watch that when I appeared on, or when I served on my first commission. And I thought it was very enlightening, and I think that we should all consider, if it's still available even, I think we should all consider that, because it basically told me how I had to comport myself, and I thought it was a marvelous tool.
And Commissioner Pope, I appreciate you mentioning that. That is a part of a routine requirement to observe that. There are certain EOs that reflect the responsibilities and others there. I guess my comment really just goes to the fact that because of the heightened sensitivity, this may require a degree of clarity beyond what we do routinely.
And Mr. Chairman, I totally agree. Formalization of it will aid in many aspects down the road.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm happy to help with the AG effort on that. And again, I think if we go back even to my first meeting in October, I think I may have drafted some of that wording myself. Right. Before I knew what I was doing, I guess. But now we come all the way back around and I kind of know what I'm doing.
Well, and I think it's key to understand that, in the work on these RFPs, there was no indication of any preference at all. We simply were developing the criteria that we thought were important, and I appreciate the fact that's a broad effort and open source. But when we get to the evaluation, that becomes much trickier. So,
yes, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for taking part in those meetings. Yeah. Also very helpful. And and just for on the record again, those who did help us in the subcommittees and working groups did sign a code of conduct as well.
Right.
So we could leverage some of that if we need to and continue building. Just moving ourselves along here, we talk about modifications or withdrawal for proposals, pretty straightforward. You can withdraw up until the due date, and then the award of the contract that all follows along with our procurement rules in Chapter 4. So moving on to general provisions, I'm going to skip past this just in the name of time because sections 2 and 3 are functionally the exact same as what A&I has. Section 4, key dates, we've gone through those already. And then again, getting into the Section 5, this is where we reflect what's going to be actually received by the qualified vendors. Here's what you need to give us in a technical proposal, and we let them kind of freestyle on that. That's what's tied to the materials in the appendices. And then cost proposal, format, and content is linked to what's on pages, or Section 6, 17, pages 17 through 21, right? If you're going to propose this type of book of work, here's what the pricing schedule might look like. If it's going to be a percentage based on the total, cost of the service, or maybe it's percentage or, a couple basis points off of what, what we're holding with the reserves manager, the investment manager rather, that's how we can capture these different styles of payment. And then we get on into the appendices. So I'll pause there before we get into all of that. Any questions on the kind of body of the RFPs?
Any questions? If there are none, go ahead.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we'd start from 1. Might give us a little bit difficulty getting to 6, but we'll start from 1. We'll go from there. So, and we do have our CISO, Keith Lawhorn, on the line. I will certainly let him jump in if he needs to. But keeping in mind that RFP 1 is token development and support. The scope of the project covers a number of moving pieces, smart contract development for the Wyoming stable tokens. We make sure we have the best practices for security standards. We need to implement error handling routines and emergency features in the case of an emergency or unforeseen attack. We need to have a compliant offering, and we list some familiar 3-letter agencies there. In terms of deliverables, we need things like code reviews, transition of the source code to a repository that we own and control, and that's all for the smart contract. And then the second function inside of RFP 1 is, again, what we formerly referred to as validator node structure, now being a bit more broader as blockchain infrastructure deployment. This is where we talk about the kind of broader scope of technology that would include a node for the Wyoming stable token, validators, API endpoints, software development kits, key management, and third-party components, as well as APIs and potentially bridging mechanisms that would allow a Wyoming stable token to be multi-chain sooner rather than later. There's more definitions here about what a validator node is and layer 1 and layer 2 blockchains, how we would set up a node with turnkey deployment, how we would monitor those platforms. And then we kind of leave it as a broader, maybe a little open about where the project location is. We want to, to the extent we could have technology in the state of Wyoming, I think that's better. However, there might be things like, this happens on a server in Wyoming, this is in a cloud somewhere, and then we can have these hybrid models as well. So those are some of the features, and I'm hopping through quickly, some of the features around smart contract development and the blockchain infrastructure. Getting into the general requirements, again, we talk about these things in a bit more detail, how one would design and develop the smart contract for the Wyoming stable token, what specifically the security standards are, and then we get into the functions and features of the Wyoming stable token. So again, this was informed by our token design working group, talking about minting and issuance, redemption and burning, reissuance, the freeze and seize capabilities, what that means, and then there's several optional pieces that would be nice value adds if someone's able to propose a book of work that also includes things like account delegation, yield distribution, and privacy, like privacy wrappers. either at the chain level or the smart contract or token level. We also note things like cross-chain interoperability. Again, we do have a remit to be a multi-chain offering. Commissioner Knob, as I said it multiple times, I'll certainly reinforce it. We do need to go from one to start to another and test until we are sure that we're in good shape before we start, launching on a plurality of blockchains. But the technology stack that's able to move that process forward has grown rapidly in a short amount of time. We talk through infrastructure deployment of the blockchain infrastructure itself. There are things like infrastructure code here that these are new acronyms to me, but that's how you know our CISO is on board now. So we've got some of those in here, and the right people will know what those mean. In terms of experience and expertise, we are obviously looking for people who have experience developing stablecoin smart contracts. We want to know how they're going to do that. We did add a decent amount of verbiage here about licensing terms. We want to make sure that any technology that's being leveraged by a third party is open source, and there are specific licenses for that, the MIT license, Creative Commons, and we have a bunch of call outs here to make sure that we are not, unintentionally infringing on anything on behalf of a third party. In terms of deliverables and milestones, we talk about code reviews before deployment, code reviews after deployment, security audits, monitoring tools, and so on and so forth. And then we've got similar kind of layout for blockchain infrastructure as well. That is just Appendix A. I mean, that is the important part. That's the scope and the requirements. And then to quickly go through B, C, and D, because B and C will get, I think, a little redundant as we go. So Appendix B is company details, operations. There'll be a lot of overlap between these about where a company is registered, who are the key team members, where is your tech stack located geographically, what is your tech stack, all of these things, whether you're technical or not, these are still kind of in the appendix. Talk about who's on the team, key personnel, your technology solution. So these are pretty agnostic questions that we've got. We do include questions around the disaster recovery plan. That's something we asked in the RFQ as well. So for most of these organizations, we do know what would happen if things go a bit sideways. Moving on to Appendix C, responsibilities and management. These are the things that are kind of the boilerplate from the A&I template that we've been asked to include here about Wyoming's own policies that we expect them to abide by. And then Appendix D is evaluation metrics. These are custom per RFP. This is, again, a high-level view of what will be the benchmarks for how we evaluate. Again, we didn't go and create the entire rubrics because we didn't know who was going to be qualified as a vendor, and we didn't want to have even someone who would be potentially creating a rubric have a relationship with a qualified vendor, because you can make the argument that the insider info is why you put 10 points here instead of 5. So that is our first RFQ in totality. Again, I'm just keeping my eye on the clock. It is 11:30. We've got several more of these, some which may even have a couple of comments on them. So I will leave it to the commission and your determination how you'd like to proceed.
What's the pleasure of the commission?
I wish we had a couple more hours, but we don't, and I think that we should get to the stuff that Commissioner Pope has, because he's done some time on it. I certainly respect his abilities, and I don't know whether we have to. I would just make a blanket amendment for the what Commissioner Pope has done, because that's his area of expertise. And I don't know if anybody else would second that, but that's where I'd go.
Commissioner Pope.
We believe in you.
Since the motion involves allocating authority to me, I probably shouldn't second it.
No, I think that's probably true. It looked like you were going to address something here.
Yeah.
I will say that the RFPs have been given a great deal of diligence, as per Anthony. So, an auditor, I know you've been involved in a little bit of it. I don't know if you have an opinion on it.
Mr. Chairman, I haven't been involved with the RFP about which Commissioner Pope speaks. I mean, I'm wondering if that's the one that produces maybe the most concern, that we move forward the others and hold that one back.
Okay,
Okay, that's fine too, if you want to go over it. Maybe, could we, attempt to, put in, the document, the, proposed amendments, so they're redlined, so when we go over it, we know what direction that we should intend to go? Okay, I see it. A yes on that, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman, further recognizing that it sounds like we may have a very brief special meeting imminently, we could potentially have a chance to review those changes and then approve it at that time.
and you're looking at 6 solely?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a January 3rd regular scheduled meeting also, so,
Right, just so, for my information, we still have the potential of 1, 2, 3, 5,
And so,
and 7.
and
Is that-
a 4 subsequently.
Well, yeah,
Understood.
4,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying for consideration today.
Right, yeah.
Is that appropriate? If it is, I would entertain a motion if that's the right thing to do.
Move 1, 3, 5, and 7?
It'd be 1, 2, 3,
1, 2, 3,
5, and 7.
1, 2, 3, 5, and 7. Mr. Chairman, I would move those. I guess I would make a comment on subsection D of the first one here on, it seems like some of these are necessarily not terms of art that we're using here. Demonstrated, robust, seamless. I don't know, at some point in time, I'm sure as we get the responses to these RFPs, we'll probably get some technical language that defines what robust is. And so at that point in time, I think we'll have a better understanding. But until we get that back from the vendors, I think those are going to have to suffice, the kind of a subjective direction.
So through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, again, just to be very specific about Appendix D on the evaluation metrics, again, demonstrable, robust, these were left intentionally kind of amorphous. Because again, when we need to derive the very specific evaluation criteria, that needs to be done by a group of commissioners, subject matter advisors, agency members that
We
are
don't know what
independent.
we don't know, and I
Exactly.
think our vendors are going to direct us into the, funnel us down into the correct area.
Right, that's part of it as well.
Thank you. So that's my motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, is there support for that motion?
second.
It's been seconded. Is there any discussion?
Mr.
Hearing- Yeah,
Sorry,
please.
Mr. Chairman, and I apologize. And I've had this discussion with the director as well, and I expressed this concern when we started this. This is an exceptionally sped up timeline to go through RFPs and get this many RFPs issued. And I think everyone who has looked at these has done a very good job. That being said, I think in a lot of these, there's probably a lot of items that may be not applicable, or maybe, we probably have a little more than we need, if anything, on these. I think that's okay, because that shakes out on the other end. All the work on an RFP has to get done, whether it's through through refining these or on the question and answer end on the back end. I think I would ask the commissioners for patience with staff, because I think this Q&A, I think the task of the Q&A is going to be substantially larger than anyone is anticipating. And so this timeline, I'm really concerned. I'm not so much concerned about vendors getting stuff to us, but reviewing all of these and rewarding in February is very tight. So I will say that out loud, that I think that is a expedited timeline, perhaps beyond reality, but we'll see. But that being said, I go ahead and support getting these out.
There are going to be some interesting decision makers.
I appreciate the auditor's point. The difficult, we do it once, the impossible takes a little longer.
Yeah.
Through the chair, and I wanted to say, I do understand where Commissioner Racine is coming from. There are a lot of just questions in here that may not be applicable, but perhaps in some edge case they would be, and you wouldn't want to take them out because then if it
Right.
comes up later, you're a little exposed on that. And I think one of the things just to mention in regards to the timeline and getting reviews and interviews done in February, it is a bit of a known unknown. The hope is, again, if these organizations are finding each other in these consortia, it's one cohesive proposal to say, we're going to do all of these things, and then there are fewer of them to review.
Right.
One would hope. If things come in on an individualized basis and, we have to go through a lot of different ones, then it's a whole another ballgame. But again, we do have one more caveat that I don't think I discussed. It's buried in our procurement rules and maybe somewhere in the things we did today. When the RFPs come in on January 30th, we, whether that's the commission or an evaluation committee, do have the ability to do another kind of round of cuts.
Right.
So if everything is coming in on an individualized basis and on-chain analytics still has 8 different parties, we can review them and say, okay, well, we're going to apply a preliminary evaluation criteria. We're going to get this down to 3, which is the magic number in the procurement rules that we want to interview. So that's a possibility as well. So we don't know what we don't know until we get there. But at the same time, we have, I think, put enough guardrails in place to be ready for whatever does come our way.
Okay. All right, further discussion? Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. Thanks. So we're looking at number 6 now. What is the, I mean, I suspect if you have 30 changes that's a wild, and you're not complete with that. That's going to take some time. So, Treasurer Meyer.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, I would move that staff coordinate with Commissioner Pope. I don't have whiskey in my coffee, my guy. With Commissioner Pope on providing a red line revision of number 6 and have that out as early as possible for the commissioners to review and comment on before the 27th meeting, December 27th meeting. Is that the timeline we're looking at?
Is it, I
January
mean,
3rd.
I think you're talking
Oh, you
about
wanna go to
terms of
January
art, aren't you? Or,
Yeah.
and are there substantial revisions to this?
Yes, there are. I could go through a couple of them so you can see the general nature.
Sure.
Okay,
If that,
that's fine.
okay, yeah, that's,
Okay, Appendix A, scope of project. An audit, as defined by both the AICPA and the state of Wyoming, is procedures designed to basically confirm comprehensive financial statements. So the use of the term audit is inappropriate in most of the circumstances within within this RFP, because we are looking for attestation engagements that involve proof of reserves and potentially extending to an audit of comprehensive or a comprehensive audit of the agency's financial statements. So like in the first sentence, I would change it to read, the RFP involves conducting procedures designed to verify the sufficiency of the reserves backing the WIST stable token, potentially extending to a comprehensive audit of the agency's financial statements, as well as implementing a near real-time attestation system for WIST circulation and reserves. That's an example of one of the edits that I would make. the reason it's important is that our RFP will be used in many ways in the response from the potential auditors and service providers. One of those being, okay, do they have sufficiency of expertise within the organization to provide us with the information that we need in order to audit and to prepare the information for us to audit, as opposed to will we be preparing the information that we're going to then audit ourselves. And so it goes to scope and pricing and everything if we use the correct language. That's why it's important. It's also important to me because I, as a practitioner, want to make sure that any product that comes out of the commission is correct in format and function. So that's why I'm picky about this side of it, and I would ask the commission's indulgence in letting me suggest the edits.
I have no problem with that. I don't know if any other commissioners do. I don't know if the 20, I mean, if we have a regular meeting on the 3rd, that may be.
Mr. Chairman, to be clear, the 3rd would be a 30-minute special meeting on
Right.
January 3rd.
Right.
Right, and that's targeted for RFQ 4.
4.
Defining who the qualified vendors are, and also RFP 4. So going through one of these for reserves management, which again, just based on the heft, we should think
Right.
about going through in some detail. And we are already working on that with the subject matter advisors. We're working on that with the treasurer's office, so.
So my sense, and I guess what I'm getting at, Commissioner Pope, is could you circulate a draft prior to, because I think your intent here is to clarify, not to change dramatically. There may be some places where you have good reason to do that, but I don't know if that, Director, I'm simply trying to move us along, but I think his recommendations could be very helpful, and they may be many in number, but they may not be dramatically difficult to describe.
Mr. Chairman, I agree almost in whole with what you were saying. There is only one small section that I would probably change, and that's in 2.4.3, and that is sampling versus full scope audits. Of course, I would change the term audit, but the intent for that is to constrain the auditor and make sure they are conducting the audit with 100% testing. That may end up being an extremely expensive thing for us to ask. And if I am an auditor, I would not very probably agree to even doing that because that would be signifying or signaling up front what procedures that we are using and giving the client the ability to define for us what procedures we use. And that could possibly infringe on our independence as CPAs. So what I would, the suggested language is to say that if sampling is proposed as being adequate, a discussion of the cost, benefits, and risks of sampling would be required within this. And if they choose not to answer that, I would not probably answer either one of those questions. I would, that's then what we would discuss as part of the RFP consideration. But that's one area where I I would probably, that's the only area that I've seen so far where I would probably say we may not want to try to define that. But I will, I think Director Apollo has some comments on that as well.
Mr. Chairman?
I'll be quick, Mr. Chairman, and Commissioner Pope. I think this one in particular is talking about proof of reserves, right? So if you're talking about a Merkelized audit, that is a click of a button, right? I think, so what I'm saying is I don't disagree with your commentary. I just think we maybe should expand this out to say, if something's on chain and you could audit it in 30 seconds, you can do the full scope. If there are accounts, because this is giving proof of reserves as an example account, if there are other accounts that are also critical for us that are not on chain and do need that due diligence, then yes, I agree with everything you're saying. I think this may be a poor example in here, or maybe the converse. It's an applicable example, but it doesn't scale to other account types.
Mr. Chairman, I agree, and that's one of the reasons I think we just need to sit down, probably one-on-one with, I need to sit down with Director Apollo and our other staff to make sure that each of these things is correct in both terminology and scope.
So I'm thinking, Director, that these are available and we can kind of look at an iteration of it.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And I realize that we're, talking about a 30-minute, and I don't want to cut into that because that's the primary reason for that. But I also am wondering if there isn't a way to, again, depending on how material the changes are, they may be easy to describe relatively simply and simply correct them. So if that's okay, we might consider adding a little bit of time to that meeting for this one as well. I think the 27th is pretty ambitious to get that done.
Well, to be clear, when we start talking about the 27th, that meeting is February 27th.
Oh, February 1st, I thought it was.
No, I'm talking about the 3rd of January.
The 3rd of January,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So-
I was,
Yeah.
I thought it was the 27th of December. I mean, I'm gonna work
No.
that week, I don't know about you guys.
Well, I'm sure we will all be in front of our computers in some way.
Yeah,
shape, or form,
okay,
But when we
fine.
talk about the 27th, I believe that's one of the due dates for the vendors who want to qualify for RFQ4 to give us content.
Okay,
So that's no
Okay.
onus on the commission.
all right. Thank you. Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, I was just thinking that there's some standards I think that we use. It's like and I don't know what MHP is when they do the state, it's the auditor. Now, is it 95% or 99% probability that everything's Jake, or how's it, what is that percentage, or do they use that, Christie? As far as MHP, when they do the state's audit, they do a sampling, but I don't know what percentage of reliability the sampling, it's like a poll almost. Is it 95%? Is it 99%? Or
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, we don't get to know those things. But yes, they are reaching some percentage of coverage in that.
yeah, and I guess, Mr. Chairman, Anthony, I don't know any of the potential competitors you have. Do they advertise the percentage of accuracy that they have, or reliability? You might check into that and make sure that we're at least in the ballpark with what everybody else is doing.
Very good.
Public comment?
Director, anything more before we go to public comment?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure that I know there was a motion, perhaps it went over my head. In terms of, we talked about 6. The goal is to approve all of these on the January 3rd? Is that my?
Well, so correct me if I'm wrong, and Stephanie, you probably know this. I think we moved the RFPs 1, 2, 3, 5, and 7.
Yeah, so the other two, 4 and 6.
And
And we're comfortable moving forward with the remainder.
I think that was the substance of the motion, Director. Yeah,
It'll be a learning experience, I'm sure.
that was my understanding. And I see clarity from Norm, I see clarity from Stephanie, and I think the rest of the commission felt that way too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must have been unplugged when my computer got unplugged.
So
Yeah.
coming back, is there anything
It's coming back.
before public comment?
Did we vote on that?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
great.
we did,
I couldn't remember.
yeah.
In terms before public comments, we had next steps on here. Obviously, the RFPs are functionally the next step. And I do want to mention that I will be working with Deborah to bring forward the reserves management rulemaking. I don't think we're expecting to have that presented to the commission until perhaps the February meeting, the February 27th meeting. But if that gets accelerated, we can always kind of, start socializing that earlier rather than later. And then next meeting, again, we will add a January 3rd meeting in here as a special session. We do have a February 7th meeting on the calendar as well, one of the kind of auxiliary meetings we put on there,
Yep.
just to make sure that if we need to approve things at that time, and I think we might, if we get all of the vendor proposals in at the end of January, we have some time to review them. If we need to do like a round of cuts, we have the 7th to make that determination, and then February 27th will be when we kind of turn the keys and figure out who we're going to move forward with.
Mr. Treasurer.
Real quick, custodials versus depositories, I think those are two different things, and we've got custodial stuff. I don't know whether or not sometime we'll have to have some, discussion about what a depository is. I know we have depositories for our state funds, and they're not custodials, so, and I don't know whether we even have to, broach that conversation, but think about it.
Okay. To the chair, Commissioner, absolutely. And I think that'll have some impact on the RFQ4 conversations as well.
All right. If there's nothing else, public comment? And I don't have, I know that we had Albert F., who had his hand up earlier in the meeting. Stephanie, I looked on the participants list to see if anybody had their hands up. Okay, we'll just leave it to you, since you have, my connection's been incredibly unstable.
And just as a reminder, we do limit speaking to 3 minutes per speaking party, 1 question from an online participant. Speakers will be asked to provide their first and last names for the public record. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Sean Worthington. I'm the CEO of Rata Tech, a Wyoming-based company that specializes in virtual currency. I'm also the author of a book called Beyond Bitcoin, The Future of Digital Currency, and another book called
your name,
Perfect Money. Sean Worthington.
Okay, thank you.
And our company specializes in making advanced currencies, much more advanced than what we have these days. And we wanted to be involved, but we were not able to submit a pre-qualification because we don't use blockchain. And I just wanted to quote something from Charles Hoskinson, who's the founder of Cardano, who spoke at the SALT Symposium last August. He said, quote, "If you poll people, even people in the cryptocurrency space, the vast majority of people are still scared about losing their keys or getting hacked. And this is among domain experts, not just grandmas." And what he's saying is a problem that is very specific to blockchain that really cannot be changed. And so we are hoping that there's some way that we can get in as a non-blockchain candidate and that we can contend, we've got a lot to offer. For example, we provide granular privacy, which means that, say you wanted to make it so that people that spend less than $1,000 a day don't need KYC. You could do that with our coin. With other coins, I don't think that you could do that. We are a totally different legal structure. It would be a new frontier of legality in that we don't have transactions and we don't have transmissions. Our system is just a counterfeit detection system. And we are the most energy efficient. There's no need for fees. Our speed is transactions complete in half a second, and we can authenticate millions of coins per second. And it's also very easy to use. So the question I have is, can our Wyoming company be allowed to participate and at least submit a request for proposal, even though we're not blockchain?
Director, and I think, thank you very much for your comment. There has been some work and some legislation around this, so please.
Through the chair, and Sean, you know, and we've met before. I've had a chance to see the platform at work. So a couple of things. Again, as the chairman mentioned, we do have some statutory requirements about using blockchain or DLT. We, you know, as if you're on the call now, you likely heard from earlier in the conversation that we do expect in the future to try to open up this process through our procurement rules to say if you're providing services for stablecoins, then that's something that we should have a conversation about and try to do qualifications on a rolling basis. And, you know, in terms of the RFQs and RFPs, you know, I'd hope that if there was something that RADA could have fit in, that you would have submitted a bid in that capacity. So I'm curious as to whether or not you had a chance to look at things and see whether or not there was anything applicable there, or perhaps that was not.
Well, we just asked the question whether we could submit a pre-qual based on the fact that we are not a blockchain.
Well,
and the response was no.
Through the chair, again, the RFPs and RFQs are written in a fairly specific way. I will again add that there was several RFPs, RFQs that were not necessarily blockchain related, that could have done other types of infrastructure. So again, curious as to where things would have slotted in. Again, we did the blockchain selection exercise, and that would have been another kind of gate to pass through in terms of, you know, not only the type of the tech, because we did look at DAML, we did look at, you know, DAG-based models, but, you know, there were other gates around users, TVL, you know, freeze and seize capabilities, whether or not your platform is something that's monitored by multiple on-chain analytics firms. So, you know, all of those would have still been in place. And again, we'll see how these rules that we're discussing today roll out and get promulgated in the future, how discussions like this might change the criteria that the commission puts forth. But for where we are right now, those are the determinations that have been made to date.
All right, thanks. I just, you know, noticed that the Wyoming Stable Token Act doesn't say anything about blockchain, really. It talks about virtual currency. So I hope that you will invite other, you know, non-blockchain technologies in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Worthington. Are there other? Okay, please.
Hi, guys. My name is Francis Gowan, for the record. I unfortunately joined a little late and got heard about the RFQ4 being reopened. Are you able to provide a quick summary on that? I saw the other RFQs were approved, but just hoping to get up to date there.
Thank you.
Through the chair, Francis, just quickly, RFQ4 is is the largest of the, sorry, RFQ4 and subsequently RFP4 are the largest books of work we have in front of us. They're focused on reserves management. So this is, the commission looking for an investment manager, fiat custodian, custodian who could handle U.S. Treasury securities, and then many different back office features, middle and back office accounting, attestation support, striking a daily NAV, multiple features like that. That's what is contained in our FQ4.
That's understood. I was just wondering, it sounds like you're reopening the process or descoping in your terms, and I was just curious what that entails.
Sure. So through the chair, on our website, you'll find the RFQ results memo. If you access that on our website, you should be able to see more details about RFQ4. Again, we are not rescoping it. We are simply re-advertising it. It'll be the same criteria that there have been. Just we're going to make sure that the number of groups we talked to that came through and what wanted to be consortia, but we're not there in the process yet, that everyone gets a fair shake in the process and we're able to bring everyone who wants to be involved in.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, guys.
No others? Anyone in the room here? Hearing none, members of the commission, I think we have come to the end of our meeting today. Any comments that anyone wants to make? If they want to make a comment about maybe the end of the meeting, that's fine.
Move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
It's been moved to adjourn.
Wholeheartedly second.
It's been seconded. All right, thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye. We are adjourned.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.